Hi, I'm Bobby Halton, and welcome to Trusted Voices. Today we have the pleasure of visiting with a fire service legend, and legend would be the word, seriously, Gary Brees, who has been the executive director of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, where you served in that capacity for 20 years almost, right?
23 years.
23 years, which is a heck of a haul. That's a career. But before that, Gary had a career. He was a firefighter in Florida. You were a firefighter in Virginia as well?
No.
Correct me.
Actually, my career, my fire service started on 103rd Street and Firestone Avenue in Jacksonville, Florida.
Wow.
I was home from college. My parents had moved to Jacksonville. We were from Tampa. I was home from college and drove up on an accident at 103rd and Firestone. And there were multiple casualties. It was a car full of little leaguers.
Oh.
And only one kid in this car, nobody was injured badly, had one broken leg, a lot of cuts and stuff like that. And one kid was not injured. And it's some of these ever things that are seared in your head, right? I'm out trying to help. I had no first aid kit with me in my car at the time. And the one kid that wasn't injured had a t-shirt on that said, "I'm protected by Batman." Right? And I was impressed with that, and I was also impressed with the fact that everybody else stood around and watched while I tried to do work. And all of a sudden, two guys show up in khaki uniforms and from the local volunteer fire department, and they took over, and I was in awe of what they did. And I went down the next day and put an application in at the West Connect Volunteer Fire Department.
West Connect?
West Connect.
Wow. How long were you there?
Well, the rest of my college, which was about 3.5 years. Okay. I was, in the summer, and then when I was at school, I was with the North Hillsborough Volunteer Fire Department in Tampa, Florida, which subsequently was merged into the Hillsborough County Fire Department now. And West Connect was consolidated, Duval County and Jacksonville. All of a sudden it became the Jacksonville Fire Division. So I had the opportunity to work in two different fire departments, two different styles, both volunteer. Okay. And when I graduated from college, having been a volunteer all that time, my degree didn't qualify me for anything that was marketable at the time. I had a degree in international relations. I was up to Orlando visiting a friend. He was taking me around. We were fire buffing around Orlando, in one fire district, and the fire chief said, "Don't bring me visitors, I need firemen." And I went, "Seriously?" He said, "Yes." I made an application, and about 2 weeks later I was hired.
No kidding.
Yeah.
In Orlando?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah.
I need firemen?
I need firemen.
Could you imagine that today? You have 45,000 people on his front lawn.
Yeah.
That's a great story. And what a great story for that area, because if you think about that, what is it, 95? Is that the road to the Orlando? I mean, that highway, the extrication.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The extrication that goes on that highway routinely.
Yeah.
You got the guys like Isaac Frazier and those, Lee Hollins and those Florida firefighters who are really kind of setting the bar for education training and standards, and they're right there. So it's a great story that your first, your inspirational story is from an extrication story, a car wreck, which is 90% of what we do outside of EMS.
Well, my inspiration was my great-grandfather, who, when I was home to visit him, he lives in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. My inspiration was a guy named Johnny Marenko. Johnny Marenko was the driver on the engine at Diamond Hose number 2 in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. And he was the only paid person. He worked Monday through Friday, a day shift. And my grandfather would walk me down as a little kid, 5, 6 years old, and take me down, and they'd smoke cigars together and play checkers, literally. And I had the opportunity, first time in my life, to crawl all over an Aaron's Fox.
Now, people have to be out there listening, the young guys listening, playing checkers in that time frame was like being on Twitter today, or Candy Crush.
It was
pass the time.
It was the pass the time, and for me, it was this huge Aaron's Fox engine.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Gorgeous.
And that's, big steering wheel.
Tons of chrome.
And a stairway that went upstairs that had a bar across it that said only members were permitted.
Ooh.
So I never went upstairs.
Ooh.
Right. But Johnny Marenko took me for rides on the engine, and was probably my first memory of engagement with the fire service.
Now, before college, you had some military time, right? Or was that
well,
after
I took a break during college and went to the Marines. Yeah.
Went to the Marine Corps. And so you had service in there. So was that service training displayed in the street that day, or was that prior to?
No, my Boy Scout training was
That's your Boy
displayed on the street.
Scout? Okay, well, just as important. And a lot of guys and gals out there, if you're listening and you're a scout, especially if you're an Eagle Scout, we have the Eagle Scout Affinity Group,
Yes,
which meets at FDIC every year. And
correct.
Last year we had 250.
Was it that many?
I
Lou
believe
Paulson from California.
Lou Paulson, I think he's the standing president right now, or maybe it's not. It's he's out of Indiana, and I love this guy too. He's
Well, Lou got it started.
right. Lou got it started, and he's passed the baton. And so, if you're an Eagle Scout and you want to get involved with the Affinity Group, and huge group and growing.
That's very nice. Yeah.
I think you look at Eagle Scouts, you look at naval commanders, you look at astronauts, you look at the fire service. It's
all intermixed.
It's like the Skull and Bones Society of the fire service. So you're in Orlando now. You're on the job, and where do we go from there? Where do we find you?
I worked at a fire control district. There were 16 fire districts in Orange County at the time, and I got tremendous experience. It was the worst experience of my life. It was the absolute old school, do it my way. I'll tell you how high to do it. Actually, I was a firefighter working on shift, and I saw a notice posted on the bulletin board about a meeting about a developing new program with the Emergency Medical Services in the state of Florida. And nobody gave me protocol, so I made arrangements for a guy to come in and work for me. I took off, went to Florida Hospital to this meeting about this new EMS program. I walked in, and my chief and captain were there, and I waved at them across the room, and they waved back. And about 10 minutes before the meeting came, the captain comes over and he says the chief wants to see you in his office tomorrow morning. When he gets in. I said, okay, that's really great. During the meeting, I asked several questions about this new EMS program and the training, this new thing called emergency medical technicians and stuff like that. And I was very satisfied, said goodbye to everybody, went back to the station, went in the chief's office the next morning and got my ass handed to me.
Whoa.
It was if we want you to go to a meeting, we'll tell you what meetings we want you to go to. We'll tell you what we want to say, et cetera, et cetera. And I came away from the meeting enthusiastic, and I came away from the meeting with the chief the next morning absolutely devastated. And the fence lines in that department were pretty close together. It was a very autocratic chief, terribly autocratic. About 3 or 4 weeks later, I got a phone call from the guy from the Department of Health who was running the meeting that I went to, and he asked me, he said, are you going to be around? And I said, I'd like to talk to you. So I met him off duty this time. And,
Smart move.
And he asked me if I wanted to leave the fire department and join the Department of Health for the state, and join this new thing called the Emergency Medical Services section. Wow. Which I did. And they subsequently hired me away to go to the national headquarters. I was the Emergency Medical Services specialist for the ACEP. Stayed there for a while. In Florida, College of Emergency Physicians hired me back, and I went back to Florida. and ran the Florida College of Emergency Physicians. I wound up the whole time with ASEP was 14 years.
Wow.
But it was a unique time because I was involved in the development of ALS, ACLS, ATLS, BTLS,
PALS, sure.
all of that was happening at the same time. And I stayed engaged at that time. I went back to Orange County. Our offices were in Orange County. And I got involved with another fire control district as a volunteer and as a commissioner. I had an interest in extrication. We actually started doing a conference, the pre-hospital conference on emergency medical services, now called ClinCon, that has lasted since 1984, okay, 83, something like that. It's still going today. Also started the national ALS competition.
Oh yeah.
Where we had paramedic teams coming in.
Right. They still do a version of that at the EMS Today show.
They do. Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. And then what I really liked is a group of us decided that we were going to enter extrication competition in Mississauga or in Gravenhurst, Ontario.
Turk. Yeah.
Well, this was before Turk.
Before it was Turk.
This was actually, I was still at ASEP in Florida. We formed a team called the Carbusters. Okay. 3 of us, myself, John Chakowski, and Steve Kidd. And but at that time we had changed. We went from 16 fire districts, got merged into Orange County Fire Department. So the 3 of us plus 4 other people formed the Carbuster team, and that team developed the whole concept for, I don't know if you've ever seen the videotape series of the Carbusters.
Yeah, I've seen Carbuster videos.
The hallmark was we systematized extrication.
Right.
And we're able to take average time of extrication from about 30 minutes to sometimes as low as 12 minutes to do a whole series of routine exercises. And John, about that time is when I left and went to the International Association of Fire Chiefs. Those 2 guys continued on with Carbusters.
I remember seeing Carbuster videos, and correct me if I'm wrong, but remember the old, it was like a television show almost that they had for a while.
Yeah, that was John and Steve. They carried that on and did tremendous work. Introduced things like out of a volunteer department, actually in Florida, Step Chocks. Right. That came out of a volunteer department after an extrication course.
That was great stuff.
We found
We're
a
still
new
doing
way.
a lot of that stuff today. I mean, it hasn't changed a lot. I mean, the core fundamentals are still there. I mean, the stabilization, the whole, you know.
So, I mean, and that was my sort of contribution then, and then I went to the International Fire Chiefs.
Okay, so without, who were some of the most interesting that you got to work with?
Well, let me answer the question a little bit differently. This was at a time when some of the icons of the National Fire Service, who made a difference in this critical 1985 to 2000 time period, when they were moving through the chairs of the organization. And I'll tell you this, I'm not avoiding the question, but I was a student of leadership for that 23 years.
Sure.
I watched new styles, new approaches for leadership come and go, from large departments to very small departments. And from all of those things, I took both good and not so good lessons away. It would be unfair to talk about very many of the ones that I worked with. But without a doubt,
they were all wonderful people.
They were, but the first ones I had, Ben Wassenaar, who was the chief of Rotterdam, was our president when Jerry Carl was actually the president when I took over, and then Ben took over right away, and then that was followed by Warren Isman, and then Ron Coleman, and there was this whole series of thought leaders, and what a phenomenal opportunity it was to work with these people.
And how fortunate that at a time when you were bankrupt, you had people who came in of that caliber, you know what I mean, who probably didn't need as much care and maintenance and support as others may, and there's no disrespect to anybody else who may have come subsequently, but those three men are,
they were
incredible.
They were the right people at the right time.
Yeah, Warren Isman. I mean,
and I just I happened to have the opportunity to be the executive director at the same time. So it was a whole sense of building something new, rebuilding something that had existed for a long time.
So we always laugh about mission. You and I labor over doctrine and mission and customs and courtesies, and we obsess over it, which is good. It's healthy, and I think we're moving some things in a good direction. With the IASC and where you are now, if you went back, what are some of the things? I know we had the dinner. The dinners don't happen anymore.
The banquets.
The banquets are over.
Right.
Which for folks like us is
right.
Yeah. And not right or wrong or good or bad. Things change.
Right.
Things change. But I think that certain functions and customs and courtesies, as I like to call them, it's a traditional military term, are very important. I mean, the significance goes way beyond the dinner and the event and the wearing of the uniforms and it goes to values and purpose and principle.
That's right.
Yeah. There's it's like the 13 folds. There's a message in each fold.
Each fold, that's right.
And so the question is, and throwing stones, what would you have added, or what would you, just because we always look back and say, I wish I had done this, because I do that with FDIC every year. I think, I had Admiral Moore. I wish I had, I had this person. I wish I had, anything like that you can think of? Because we both are terrible wonks when it comes to stuff like that.
I think, introspection, if you will, looking back.
Yeah.
I would have asked better questions when I took over, okay? Although I'm not sure even getting the answers that we were in such financial difficulties would have changed anything, right? The other thing is, and it goes to understanding the fire service. My personality type on the Myers-Briggs profile is ENFP. The personality type of the board of directors and the majority of the fire service is either ISTJ or ESTJ. And what I found is what we both found, the board and myself, after 3 years, I had a 3-year contract. After 3 years, we both said, we don't know if this is working or not. I was pushing the organization very hard to change, and they were still trying to hold on and change, and I had good support from presidents, but it was still the whole organization. And I sat down with a mentor, a former president of the International Fire Chiefs, and I just I said, I am totally frustrated. And he said, don't be frustrated, you just don't understand how to communicate. And I went back and he told me about, it's the first time I'd ever heard of Myers-Briggs.
Right.
And he told me about it. He told me that the fire service, military, and police are in these 2 categories, and when I took my score, I'm over in a totally different category. And what I found was when I would talk about a new project, in my mind, it's done. All right? When I would talk about a new project with STJ people, they're going, we have to do this and this
process
and this. They're into
weeds,
right?
Right.
And so I changed my communication style, and I began saying, okay, here's the vision, and here's the first several steps about how we're going to get there. And that was one of the turning points in my ability to better manage the organization, was me learning how to communicate with our governing body. And when I did that, I got more leeway, and they began understanding that I could not only visualize something, but I could accomplish it. And working with the support of the board and we were able to turn it around. I think, like I said, we bought the building about 6 or 7 years after we were bankrupt, and continued to build the organization. And we did tremendous things. You know about the accreditation program.
Amazing.
You know about the work that we did with the labor management initiative between the IFF and the IFC.
Right. Which is still ongoing. That's a process.
And out of that came the CPAT, the candidate physical ability testing, the labor management initiative, the peer fitness wellness program. All of those things
we still feature every year at FDIC, and
exactly.
try to keep that going, and a hugely successful program.
And I think one of the
and if you think about it, that program's 15 years?
No, it's 20 plus years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And fitness is the biggest craze in the fire service right now.
Yes. Well, we finally recognize we have professional athletes in the fire service. They just happen to, instead of playing football, they do firefighting.
Right. And extrication and EMS.
Yes, and all of the other
high tangle rescue.
Exactly.
You name it. So
I think one of my aha moments was when I recognized that labor had to be a co-equal partner in leading the fire service.
Which is interesting, because oftentimes organizations have titles that are almost exclusive versus inclusive, and when you hear the I-Chiefs or the International Association of Fire Chiefs, oftentimes people think, well, what am I going to do there? Well, someday you're going to be one. So there needs to be an integration process.
As you know, at that time, in the 80s, 70s and 80s in particular, we had really contentious issues. And I'll give credit where credit's due. Two things happened. Al Whitehead, who was the general president of IFF at the time, was General President. Harold Schaeferger was the assistant to the president. We opened the door with the IFF, and while Al did not engage initially, he allowed Harold to engage. And in communications between myself and Harold, we began building a foundation for a relationship. And then subsequently, Al retired. Harold took over as general president, and that's what allowed the whole thing to sort of blossom. To blossom out. Never gone back to what it was prior. It's always gotten better. And right now, actually in Colorado, we're building on that in the position I currently have with the Colorado State Fire Chiefs, and the relationship we have with Colorado professional firefighters is just.
Which with Hickenlooper, you guys are going through some interesting changes there.
We are. We got HEART legislation passed to cover all cardiac events for career firefighters in the state. Volunteers can buy into the program. The state pays for it for career firefighters. This year, we're going after a specific cancer, developing a cancer trust, because our presumptive legislation doesn't work very well. In fact, it works very badly.
Right.
So we're taking some new initiatives, and it is just the climate that we need to have in the fire service for the challenges we have for the fire service now.
And I think it's again evolution. We talk about tradition, and Chief Coleman and I were visiting earlier. You were with us, and we mentioned how we really are 250 years, 300 years of innovation, enhanced by tradition, not impeded by it.
I agree with the comment. It's just exactly that. We've evolved the whole time.
Right.
And people take these snippets of their current career and not put it in perspective of the entire progress we've made.
And questioning the science is just as important, because science is a self-correcting industry. Mm-hmm. Things that we thought to be absolutely ironclad 20, 30, 40 years ago are no longer held that way, although they still have value. We've got more information, and we've got additional information. We have a little clearer picture. But one of my favorite old quotes that I've seen is a gentleman who was talking about New York City. And he said, in 10 years, the horse feces will be so deep, that we won't be able to, in 20 years, no one will be able to navigate New York City because of the horse feces, because there'll be so many horses. Well, along came the automobile. That kind
Along
of
came trolley cars.
trolley
Right,
cars,
yeah,
which,
right.
which changed all that. You know, we don't know innovation-wise. Heck, the cell phones in our pockets, which are changing everything with apps and smart technology, didn't exist 10 years ago. So, you know, where we'll be in 10 years will be better.
Yes.
You know, it'll just continue to get better. And what I've liked about working with you over the last 40 years, 30 years,
Pretty
we've known
close.
each other, is that it's never been this or that. It's always been this and that. And what else can we do? You know, it's not it's never been exclusive, you know, which I think is important.
Well, the whole concept of and as opposed to or
Right.
is essential to our future.
And us instead of I.
That's exactly right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you've done a wonderful job of that. So we fast forward, you help steer and help develop the IAFC to really a wonderful place, and before you decided to move along to new endeavors, and rewardingly so, as you're back engaged now, but you took a well-deserved hiatus, if you will, and kind of got a little introspective for a couple of years.
Well, left the IFC,
Yeah.
went in the private sector,
Right.
left the private sector, became the FEMA regional administrator,
Which I thought was really interesting. Yeah.
and then segued out of that and became the executive director for the Colorado State Fire Chiefs.
So that's where you are right now. And what do you see? Obviously, Colorado take it beyond that. We talked about challenges. We talked about opportunities, and I think every challenge is an opportunity. Every opportunity is a challenge. They're interchangeable. I think we grow from stuff like that. I mean, I pity the people who are born Rockefellers because
No challenges?
Yeah, a little adversity is good for the soul. You
Right.
know, it builds character and appreciation, right? And I think the fire service is starting to appreciate a lot of things. As you see Colorado where it is today, and we're moving to now self-managed investment portfolios versus defined pension plans, where we're moving into a more supportive environment. Where do you see the fire service going in terms of character and quality, in terms of standards and not so much standardization? And there's a difference. There's a standard and there's standardization. Standardization is local. Standards are national. What do you think we're going to be focused on, or what do you think, looking at the Colorado situation, what are they focused on, and what do you think the nation should be focused on? Because we've got an interesting opportunity with a change in leadership at the federal level to maybe have some other programs to look at, or maybe have some other opportunities to not exploit, but to take the opportunity to develop.
The short story is the fire service needs to proactively make decisions about where we're going to go and how we're going to go there. We tend to back into things. We find that we got involved in EMS because, I know it's too simplified, but
Kind of
because
like
of the TV program.
like the drunkard's walk. We just
Right, sort of stumbled into it, and
Right.
the TV program helped move it along.
Right.
Hazardous materials. We began doing hazardous materials because we had to, but then we moved into weapons of mass destruction, and suddenly we're forefront of protecting the homeland from terrorist attacks. We're now grappling with, many states are grappling with legislation for developing the community paramedicine programs, where we're engaging not only the fire service in doing 911 calls, but we're actually actively trying to divert from 911 calls into other community resources. But we've not gone into it proactively. We're backing into it again. Nobody's saying,
Interesting.
here's how we're going to benefit from it. And the first time I learned this, and it ties back to the doctrine question, after the sarin gas attack in Tokyo, the National Guard Bureau had a meeting, and I was called to it as the fire service, because we have, in the United States, the fire service has the most experience dealing with hazardous materials, right? So I was asked to go to the meeting at the National Guard Bureau. There were 27 adjutant generals there. including adjutant generals, or either 1 or 2 star generals.
Right.
And then there was all sorts of colonels and lieutenant colonels there, and I was the only civilian representing the National Fire Service. And it was daunting to walk in the room. And after the commander of the National Guard Bureau opens the meeting up, talks about the sarin gas attack, and the first time I'd heard the term weapons of mass destruction. He talks about the weapons of mass destruction and what the Guard is going to do to respond to this new national threat. And he finished his opening comments, and he turned to me and he goes, "Mr. Brees," I remember the question, "Mr. Brees, how is the introduction of weapons of mass destruction going to impact the training and operational doctrine of the American Fire Service?" I don't remember how I answered the question. It was one of those zone out moments.
Right.
All right. Apparently I didn't make any mistakes because the meeting continued, etc. But what I realized is when the Guard was looking at taking on this new responsibility, they were able to cost it out completely. How much to equip, train, maintain what at that time were called RAID teams, which are now the civil support teams, right? And then go back to their funder, Congress, and say, we need this amount of millions of dollars to take on this new mission. The Fire Service didn't do that. We went, hazardous materials, we'll just do this weapons of mass destruction stuff alongside of it. So we had no idea what it would cost to train, equip, maintain our hazardous materials teams at this new higher level. We couldn't cost it out.
And then post 9/11, we're going to every white powder call.
Exactly, correct. Exactly. So all of a sudden we found ourselves
millions of dollars
engaged in this new thing called weapons of mass destruction, homeland security, and we are unable to articulate the impact on us. We still haven't been able to do that today. So that's the kind of backing into decisions I was talking about. So that's one thing. I hope we become more proactive. The other one is I see a continual move toward the more effective operation of fire departments, directly meaning the consolidation of fire departments. Consolidation, unification, merger, whatever you want to call it. Because in today's environment, we can't supply the kinds of things that we need to be able to supply with small fire departments. Whether it's the infrastructure, meaning training, recruiting, all of those kinds of things, or whether it's actually the operational ability.
Right, our operational costs have far exceeded the mill levies, the ability to generate the support.
Exactly. And if you've got a fire district or a city that's basically residential versus commercial, or basically balanced, and changes happen, like in Colorado we have Tabor, in California they have, I forgot the name of the
Prop whatever.
Yeah,
it's
Prop
all
13. Prop 13.
13.
Okay, capping things and stuff like that.
Right.
So the way you fight that is to begin, or way you not fight it, the way you manage it is to figure out what, and we haven't done this either, what the optimal size is of a fire department for the benefit of the delivery of services that we need to deliver.
Or the level of service that community wants.
Or the level of service.
Right.
But again, we're backing into it.
Right.
Let me ask you, what's the optimal size fire department? Is it 10 stations? Is it 15 stations?
In the community.
It also depends on span of control,
right,
and the ability to, all the infrastructure and everything.
You have an extremely rural community, you may be able to get away with 1 or 2. Right. If you've got an incredibly dynamic urban or suburban community, it's a different story.
So in my mind, an optimal department is a fire district with fire commissioners whose only job is to worry about the fire service, not running a city, not anything else. Its only job is to run a fire department. All right, so it's a fire district with fire commissioners that has about between 15 and 20 stations, because that's big enough to do stuff, but not too big to become so complicated.
So you're not thinking, you're thinking almost more operationally than geographically, so those 20 stations could span 1,000 square miles if they needed to.
All right, but
take North Dakota, for example.
I have never seen a discussion in the fire service to say, for the fire service, This is our optimal structure. Right? Again, so we begin to consolidations, and all of a sudden we're talking about very large departments.
You think that's okay? So that's a great discussion. So and we apologize to the viewers, but we tend to do this.
We're off a little bit.
Well, but it's okay because this is what you add, and I think that we talk about it all the time. But if you don't take time for philosophy and thought, you're missing the point of life. And Seneca again said, "You're not alive."
Yes.
And so, if we're going to be alive, the question from me is, and my take on that would be, would that be something I think that we should evolve towards and organically see how it works best, or is it something that we should model and then modify the model after experience?
See, I think it's something we should model.
It may be consolidation in some places, and it may be just the opposite in others.
That's correct. Yeah, I had a discussion with the fire chiefs in King County, Washington, many years ago. And King County is basically the entire east side of the Seattle metropolitan area.
LA County is 2 states.
No, that's right. Right. 160 stations or something.
Insane.
Now, can it be done? Yes. But can it be done? Is that the most effective, efficient service? When I was talking with King County, they were talking about creating one fire department. I said, do you realize this, how difficult that will be? Why don't you look at 2 fire departments like North King County and South King County? And that was like a non-starter. And they never have moved on that. They've done small consolidations, but never a large one.
Well, the FDNY model is really the boroughs.
The boroughs. That's exactly right.
Create natural
catchment areas.
Right, and they're managed that way.
Yep.
And very efficiently. Very efficiently. New York City gets tremendous.
So it goes back to us defining our own future, not backing into decisions, but making proactive decisions. And the other thing is, when I talk with company officers or firefighters, my comment is question everything. All right, everything we do, from operations to what we wear and how we operate, and everything needs to be open for question.
I agree.
And if a chief officer or a supervisor can't answer the question, why are we doing this? Then you need to step back as the questioner and go, wow, why are we doing this? What's the value in it? And all of the other things.
Or do some homework and find out.
Exactly.
Years ago, a good friend of ours put up a 49, shut up and train, and I'd like to put a line through it and say, in 2017, stand up and ask and then train.
That's exactly.
Stand up, ask, and continue to train.
Well, one of my first instructors in Jacksonville with West Connect Volunteer Department, his name was D. Ponsell. D was a Jacksonville firefighter who came out and trained the county guys on a volunteer basis. And his comment to me was at that time, practice doesn't make perfect, practice only makes permanent. Right? Just because you do it over and over again, it doesn't mean it's the right way, it doesn't mean it's the best way. And that's resonated me with through my whole career.
It was funny, I can't remember who it was. I spoke to an athlete one time and I said, about practice, that way you'll do it right every time. He said, oh, no. He said, I practice doing it one way every time so that when I have to do it another way, I can.
Yes.
And I'm like, whoa,
yes.
Where did that come from? He said, I know, it was Enron Kenny. He said, we run patterns all the time. He said, because when we saw an opportunity, we could exploit it.
We could change it, that's right.
We could exploit it. And I was like, wow, that's brilliant. That's some good stuff. And I think that as we see the evolution of the smart technology and all of that integrating more with the fire service, I think we're going to start to look at a lot of this operational stuff in new and really interesting ways, and we're going to have so many more quivers in our bow, that we can pull and we can.
The other thing I see coming, I know is coming. It's not a matter of seeing it. It's either augmented reality or virtual reality.
AR, sure. Yeah.
And being able to shift a tremendous amount of our training to those environments.
Not only our training, but with AR, and we already have the product, and then a couple of Digicorp and a few other folks, to where with the proper input, you can go and have AR supported and VR supported helmets, and the helmets out there, to where you can go to a house fire, and if the inputs are there, You know the layout. You can travel in and out. It's got directional stuff built into it. It's a smart helmet, and it's a great looking piece of equipment. You know, people a couple of years ago were, oh, we should go to the European helmet. Well, I've worked with the European guys, and they don't like those helmets because they knock their face pieces off. They limit your vision. This helmet's taken, I think, the best of the American helmet and the best of the European helmet. The one thing you do get with this helmet that's lost is your hearing, your face-to-face
audio hearing
is quite a bit diminished, which there's always going to be trade-offs, and maybe someday they'll figure out how to improve that. But visually, they've kept the field of vision, and when you put that visor down and you go on air, your movement's not restricted like the European style. It's lighter, and you know the AR and the VR that they can put into it, game changer.
Yes,
just a game changer.
I agree. Can we move away from the traditional?
Oh yeah,
fire helmet?
Oh, absolutely. It's an artifact, and what I mean by that is that if you look at the traditional fire helmet 60 years ago, the brim was down to here in many places, and LA County has a more wildland adapted model, and absolutely. I think what's good about the fire system, what I always like, and you and I talk about this all the time, is we may take time to move, but we move deliberately when it's the right thing to do.
True.
You look at you and I both came on before bunker gear was mandatory. Really, we had bunking jackets, but we didn't have. We had 3/4 boots, and air packs were come see come saw, depending on the event. Now it's radically without question because we know it's the right thing to do. So when this helmet becomes available, firefighters are going to look at it. Better protection, lighter, more efficient, it enhances my capabilities. Done.
Right.
Done. And it'll be that simple too. The fire service, the most adaptable, adjustable. Now, will we still, love to collect the old helmets? You betcha. And someday somebody's going to have a collection of helmets and they're going to be the new ones. And you say, look at how clunky this AR was. Oh my God.
Right.
You couldn't hear when you put it on. Oh, it looks like a hockey helmet. Oh, they'll be laughing. They'll be looking at the things that we're calling new as artifacts. One
of the things I enjoy is when I joined the fire service in West Connect, the first mask I used was a filter mask, the canister mask.
Oh yeah.
And then we got Cubs, the sling packs.
Oh yeah, and then came the negative pressures.
But to be able to be at a point in time when you start off with something as archaic now as a filter mask,
sure,
and end up to what we're talking about now with helmets that allow augmented reality and things like that, and integrated air systems, and high levels of cancer protection,
thermal imaging. It's all of that.
Exactly. I mean, this is like going from horse and buggy to rocket science.
Right, and full disclosure, we're friends, and we were visiting with my son, and he said, yeah, you could fly some of those old, I fly the new one.
That's right.
And you talk about his helmet, the military helmets, especially for pilots, each iteration that comes off the line, they get these helmets have moved and have changed, and they went from the old bubble gobbles to now they're much sleeker. And
in fact, we're going to have a workshop at our conference this year about talking about new helmet design and how it's changed.
I'll have my friends who do the smart helmet. I'll get you in touch with them.
I'd very much like to do that.
Yeah, I'm working with them. They're great guys too. We've got a bunch of us at MIT this week for doing an AR/VR conference. MIT is, so a bunch of us are going to visit about AR and VR and what's going on there, and from the fire service perspective, and really neat stuff. And people always ask me that, well, what about the leatherheads? Leatherheads will still love the leatherheads. They'll still love the leather helmets, but they'll be the first firefighters to put the new ones on because they're into the game.
Yes,
they get it. For them, it's not about looking cool, it's about being cool, and by that, being cool to them is proficient, effective, and the best. And anything that's going to stop them from being the best, they're not going to tolerate.
Yes, You've built FDIC.
No.
You and your team.
I show up.
Yeah. All right, you and your team have built it. What's really awesome about that is you go there and you experience the future.
Oh yeah.
Not only in the stuff you see on the floor or the classes, but the people.
Oh.
I mean, it's thrilling, it's energy, and that's what gets me stimulated to be able, like I said, be able to start where I started and be where I am now.
And you built FRI, and that's another great show. It's got a different mission, and they're both incredibly important. One is more operational, and the other one is more organizational, for lack of not getting too far into the weeds.
Yeah.
And I think that when they come together, it's magic.
Yes.
And those two shows and organizations have always complemented one another, because you can't have a good organization that isn't competent, and you can't be competent unless you're in a good organization.
Exactly.
And I always love the synergy between the magic between those two shows, and if you look at the instructors, it's the same cats, just talking talking about a different passion, or focusing on a different project, and it's been great to share, all the time we've been able to share together, and in terms of what we're doing, and what's always been so awesome too is the friendly collaboration has always been. Well, what are you doing? Well, that's what we're doing. It hasn't been this
and, not or.
And exactly. It's and it's just wonderful. And I have to tell you that I'm so glad you're still here. I know, we're at the point in life when we're looking at the emeritus roles, which are great roles. I mean, and they're the target. If you don't make the emeritus role, something bad happened, right? So, as you move towards there, staying in Colorado, because I watch you. You're
no, Colorado's home. We've been coming out here for 40 plus years to ski, and it was one of those one day baby. Okay. Right. And then when our son, who's a firefighter, Oren's a son, they're a firefighter on the Castle Rock Fire Department, lieutenant.
One of the founding principals in the stair climb movement.
Yep.
And God bless him for that. Oren literally is one of the people who conceptualized it.
Ones. That's right.
Was right there and has worked with me since then annually. And we've put on some pretty dang good climbs. And full disclosure, I've had some health issues. There's no big surprise there.
Right.
But Oren is one of the people who at FDIC, which drains me. So it's the end of the week, literally carries me up and down, and which is tremendously for me. I think it's great that our kids are taking care of us.
Passing it on to Oren as a legacy. He's actually the 5th generation in our family. It goes back to my great grandfather, actually with Diamond Hose number 2 in Hazelton, Pennsylvania. My grandfather who took me to the fire station, his dad was a volunteer at that department. It's who we are, Bobby.
Yeah.
Right? It's who we are.
Yeah. We were talking about this today, and I think it's not that we like to do this. It's not that we want to do this. We need to do this.
It's a great one.
It completes us. We're salmon. We're the swans and Capistrano.
Calling we don't understand.
That's
right?
exactly right.
We have to do it.
Right. We have to do it. You stopped at an accident. You had to do something.
Yep.
Yeah.
And suddenly here we are.
And here we are. Gary, I just wanted to say
thank you, Bob.
Thank you for everything you've done for the fire service. Thank you for your passion and your grace and your ability to measure things the way you do and to dream the way you do. I think it's really, really important. I think you've done a wonderful job of helping other people to see things in themselves that they didn't know they had. I know many of my friends who've served with you on the board just can't stop saying how important you were to them, and
very gracious.
How they wouldn't have been able to have completed their term if you hadn't been there, and how I watched the organization during my career just continue to get better and better and better, and watch you do what you do and the way you did it. And it's interesting because folks don't understand how really important it is to have someone who can subjugate their ego as you would, to allow the president to come up and do what they need to do and be the president and have the spotlight and meanwhile have to be the guy who day to day makes sure the bills are paid and the staffers are there and the lights are on, and without that stuff the president couldn't be in that spotlight and couldn't dream and couldn't inspire and do the things that they needed to do. And you did that for 23 years for the fire service, and plus the 20 years you did before 20 plus years before you got there with EMS and everything else. And it's great because you absolutely disproved that horrible line about 200 years unimpeded by. Seriously, listen to this man's story, and you did it with tremendous style, and you've always been, to me, someone I could pick up the phone and I would get the truth from, whether it was good or bad, whether it was supportive or cautionary. It was there, and you were one of the first people to pick up the phone when I got this job. And you were absolutely spot on, and folks who want something from you will tell you what you want to hear. Folks who love you will tell you what you need to hear.
Well, on that note, I love you.
Love you too, brother.
Thank you, Bobby.
God bless. I'm Bobby Halton. This is Trusted Voices, and we've been visiting today with Gary Brees.